Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. In the midst of environmental chaos, economic uncertainty, and an endless array of health issues, mothers remain the backbone of our families and exponentially impact their communities. Such is the case of the brave women featured in this new book, A Mother's Grace, Healing the World One World at a Time. Author Michelle Moore is founder and executive director of Mother's Grace, an award-winning nonprofit organization that supports thousands of mothers and their children in crisis every year. She endured overwhelming trauma as a young girl when her mother died suddenly and later struggled with divorce, cancer, and a son with juvenile diabetes. She begins by recounting how women in her circle of mom friends helped heal her childhood wounds and empowered her to claim victories in adulthood. Along the way, through divine intervention, she meets the 10 remarkable women featured here whose personal tragedy of victory stories changed her forever. Readers seeking guidance during the challenging times we all face in life will find inspiration and hope as they meet mothers who have lived through the dire poverty, the death of a child, a spouse's suicide, terminal childhood cancer, and devastating natural disaster. The poignant and powerful stories of how each found the grit and grace to not only defeat these challenges but also turn them around to impact the world is enlightening and motivating. Michelle Moore is an award-winning strategic business veteran who is a senior vice president for LabCorp of America. She's the president and founder of Mother's Grace, a nonprofit that addresses the critical needs of mothers and their children in the midst of tragic life events by helping them with housing costs, medication, meals, housekeeping, childcare, and mentorship for long-term success. The group offers professional guidance and seed grants and advises women who wish to start their own nonprofit organization. Michelle is the recipient of the AIDS Healthcare Foundation Philanthropy and Action Award, Mask Unity's Mom Making a Difference Award, and the highly coveted Hon-Kachina Award. In 2019, she was awarded the Phoenix Business Journal Outstanding Women in Business and was granted a State of Arizona Commendation by First Lady Angela Ducey for extraordinary service to the women and to the people of Arizona. Joining us now to talk about her new book, A Mother's Grace, Healing the World One Woman at a Time, is Michelle Moore. Michelle, what an honor it is to have you with us here to share this incredible story and stories with our audience across the globe. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Rabbi. It was a really nice introduction.
Michelle, I want to go back to the earliest years of your childhood development, because this is where your wounds really began to formulate. And faith became a part of that healing, but not until you had experienced devastating circumstances in your own childhood. Take us back to those early years so we can see this is not a book which is theoretical. This is a book that's based on experience, and you've lived this.
Absolutely. So I'll take you back to when I was about 5 years old. I was living in Madison, South Dakota with my parents, young parents at the time. My dad was, and my mom were about 28. And I had a little sister, 1.5. My mom was a registered nurse, or an RN, and she, at birth, had been diagnosed with a congenital heart defect and had really excelled in her own life. Back in those times, when you had a congenital heart defect, you weren't allowed to do a lot of things, but she pushed through that and wanted to go to college, and she asked the family doctor to lie on her application so that she could get into college. And she went to St. Mary's College in Minnesota and became a registered nurse. And then kind of, basically what I talk about in my book, she went back and helped cardiac patients, pediatric cardiac patients, because she felt, a kinship with them. Anyway, she had a couple of heart surgeries and was doing fine. And then one day, and I write about this in the book, we were having a normal morning. My mom had driven us to the shoes. We went to go get new shoes. And my sister and I came home. I was upstairs getting ready for afternoon kindergarten. That's back when it was either morning or afternoon. kindergarten, and she had just dropped dead right there, and right in front of my sister, she was taking my sister to the potty, teaching her how to potty train, and my sister was sitting there, and 1.5-year-old witnessed the whole thing, and I came in, and it was an absolute trauma from that day on. At 5 years old, my mom had taught me how to use the phone, and I tried to call people, couldn't get them, and I went running out the back door, down the street, and started yelling for people to come and help. And my neighbor, who I remember, I don't know, I mean, that's what trauma does to you. Remember the weirdest things, but I remember her name 50 years ago. Mrs. Gavinbolt came running down the street, and what happened after that just is it's like a movie. It's like a movie reel that you see. My dad was out of town on business, and he was driven home in a police car. I remember a hearse, a black hearse being there. And then I remember multitudes of family members coming in from all over the state and from Minnesota. And it just being a very, very traumatic time for all of us. And so basically she had died, the surgery for the hole in the heart, which today would be a no-brainer, but back then it had come undone, and she died.
So this brought a great deal of change. Your father did the best he could, but wound up remarrying.
Yes.
And instead of focusing on the nurturing of his 2 young daughters, he was focused on his new wife. And this just further advanced your feeling of disconnection, of abandonment, and somewhat of isolation.
Absolutely. So I had been really involved in an extended family. My parents both grew up in Minnesota, and so we had grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins all around all the time. And when this happened, it really tore the family apart, and everybody was just so close. My dad got remarried about 1.5 years, 2 years later, and decided to take a job in Oregon, and moved us across country away from this very, very extended, wonderful Norman Rockwell type family. And his new wife, my stepmom, came into this family, I'm sure feeling very, insecure, because they really, really loved my mother. And, I think she probably did the best she could at the time. But it was really about her and their new marriage. And I think back then parents thought, well, kids are resilient, let's get them back to school, and let's, get our family going, and everything will be fine. But that's just not the way it works.
You write in the book that your relationship with your grandmother became kind of the replacement for your mom. And now this was like a second death for you. And this had great impact on you from a identity perspective on how you felt about yourself, and that carried forward in a lot of ways and manifested in different ways. You talk about sitting behind a handsome young man in a class, and he was broad-shouldered and attractive to you, and this was beginning of a courtship that wound up becoming a marriage.
Yes.
And seems like life had taken a wonderful turn for you, and you felt this sense of connection, and you felt this sense of longing, and you decided to have a family together, but that did not turn out immediately as you expected it to, and shortly thereafter were faced with another traumatic experience.
Yeah, that's true. But it was actually a long time. So in college is where I met my ex-husband, and you're right, had him in a psychology class, and we did start dating in college, very young, 18 and 19. And we were also, he was a star football player and I was a cheerleader. So it was one of those old stories. And we just had a lot of fun. We had a lot of great friends. His family welcomed me beautifully, and I loved his family and he loved mine. And we kind of grew up together and got married very young, right after we graduated from college, and started a life together and ended up having three beautiful boys together. And we were married for 27, 28 years, actually. I would say that, people that have been through divorce like that where you've grown up together and been part of each other's family is extremely, extremely painful, and you don't take it lightly. In fact, how you kind of brought it full circle is that when I grew up in this family, before my mom died, it was the most beautiful thing. It was the most supporting and loving family, from aunts and uncles to cousins to friends. And I think I spent a lot of my life just wanting to recreate that. And so when I got married, I thought, well, gosh, this is great. My husband and I were of the same faith. Our families were of the same faith. Our families were right there in Oregon. They welcomed me. My parents welcomed him. Our friends were all the same from college. It was just beautiful, really. But you're also, when you're 23 and 22, you don't even know who you are, especially since I hadn't really examined all of the heartache and psychological burn that I had from losing my mom. And I had serious abandonment issues. And they played out in our marriage, and he had his own issues as well. And you're trying to, figure those out, but you're also so young, you don't know what it's supposed to look like. All you know is you're in a lot of grief and dysfunction. And I will say that, I would never change anything. It's a beautiful memory, but I also think, we were married way too young.
Now, did I read correctly that you miscarried the first child?
Yeah, my first pregnancy was a miscarriage. And again, I was young, and one out of 3, 1 out of 4 pregnancies ended miscarriage. But at the time, I had no idea that was the case. And so it was just another devastating loss to me. Like, oh, well, and I finally decided I can be a mother, because I had a lot of angst and anxiety about being a mom since I didn't have mine around. And I finally get pregnant, and then I lose the baby. And it was very traumatic again. It really brought up a lot of the same trauma that I had with my mom. I went in for the 12-week or 13-week ultrasound, all happy, excited, and you're laying there and you're thrilled, and then all of a sudden they say there's no heartbeat. And so, at that age, prior to understanding miscarriages, it was just another devastating blow, a sudden blow that was like, what? I was just so happy, and now I'm just devastated. And I remember being in bed for a week, just like I'm so devastated. So yeah, that was my first pregnancy.
All along, there's an underpinning of faith, but yet it doesn't seem to be the comforting. It doesn't seem to be the go-to. It doesn't seem to be what is sustaining you, because there is so much. There's this abandonment, there's this isolation, there's this feeling of probably a certain amount of maybe shame, guilt, a little bit of self-loathing, all of that combined. Is faith playing a part in any of this to help you get through it?
That's a good question. I've analyzed that a lot. So I was born into a Catholic family and went to Catholic school and grew up going to church every Sunday and to, youth group and all of those things. And I always felt it as a foundation and as a practice. But I don't think my true faith came in, my true spirituality. We're talking religion. I was brought up in religion, right? In a foundation. But the true spirituality and faith and mercy and grace came, I would say, later in my 20s, after I really, fell apart and there was nothing left, like I started having anxiety attacks and panic attacks, couldn't get out of the house. And then the miscarriage. I mean, it came as a process. And as I look back on my life, it's truly what has gotten me through the hard times, because as you can see in the book, and many women that I've talked to in the charity, they go through these things and they go through this period of turning to something that may not help them, whether it's alcohol or drugs or dating a million men or overspending money or whatever it is, right? I always look back and like, well, how did I get through that? How did I get through that? And it was usually the practice of my faith, the practice of the religion, but what came after in the practice was this peace and grace. And that's when I look back on it and say, it was the practice that really brought it on, but it was the feeling in the moment when you are ready to collapse and have a horrible anxiety attack and you think you're not going to make it another day. I released and let go into faith, but the practice is what got me there. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense.
Yeah.
So there's faith, and then there's faith at work, and it's one thing to have it applied, it's one thing to know it, it's another thing to live it, and so that's part of this journey. So here you are, third child, healthy, 10-pound bouncing baby boy, and you've decided that your body was reflecting having given birth to multiple children, and you wanted to improve your appearance. You had part of this dealt with self-esteem and wanting to maintain a certain amount of physical beauty, and you went in to have a procedure to make an adjustment in your body contour, and were met with such a stunning surprise that radically changed your life again.
I mean, once you read the book and I sit here and listen to you, it's just so nice to hear it back, because I reflect back on my life and it's like, gosh, boy, I really dealt with a lot of stuff. But yeah, so I had, I was recreating this family. I had 3 beautiful boys. I had an amazing career. I was a vice president for a large diagnostic company, a lot of friends, and just things seemed really good on paper, right? So, I was turning 40, and I decided that I would have a breast lift, and was giving it to myself as a 40th birthday present. And I was always in a hurry back then. I was always in a hurry. 3 kids, I was working, and I was always in a hurry. And I was like, and I didn't have cancer in my family. And I was like, I'd had a mammogram the year before. And I told the plastic surgeon, I was like, listen, I really think I should have a mammogram again. He goes, I don't know why. You're only 40 and you just had one a year ago. I was like, yeah, I'm just on top of myself. I was like, I'm going to fit this in. So like my crazy life dictated, I scheduled it for the day before the procedure. And when I got there, the orders from my doctor to have the mammogram had not arrived, and I was impatient and antsy, and I probably was a little rude, and I said, come on, you guys, you got to get this over here. And they're like, listen, they didn't get it here, so you're gonna have to call your doctor's office. So I called my doctor's office, and we scheduled it for the next morning. I was supposed to check in for my procedure at 10 a.m. or 9:30 a.m. and I showed up at the imaging center at 7:30 in the morning saying, I got to get this done. And no one had told me to do this. I don't know why I was doing it, but just kind of checking off a box. Okay. So I get there, and they're arguing with me again, saying we haven't gotten the orders. And they said, and your doctor's office doesn't open till 9, so we're not going to be able to get this done. And I was like, and my sister had driven me there. We're like, what are we going to do? I felt like I really need to do it. And I don't know if I wrote about this in the book, but what really happened is this beautiful, beautiful Indian woman came out from the back, these beautiful eyes, And I was, again, I was impatient and probably not in my nicest mood. And she said, I've heard your story in the back that you are not getting your orders and that you're having a procedure today. And she said, I think we need to get this done. I was like, okay. So we go back, and it's weird. I run into a friend who's getting a mammogram, and I'm thinking it's in and out, right? In and out. And I go out, I'm changing, and someone comes around the corner and says, listen, we want to have some additional views, which has never happened to me. I was like, oh my goodness, what the heck? Can you go down to our other location about 5 miles south of here, and they'll look at it real quick. We'll get you. I mean, they were really being accommodating, which is not normal for a factory of, imaging. And so they sent me down there, and within minutes, the pathologist asked to see me. And he said, I'm seeing something I don't like here. And if I were you, I would delay this procedure. And so I did. And I was in shock. And I immediately went to another pathologist. And within a couple of days, I was diagnosed with a very, very serious breast cancer. And really put into perspective everything that, well, first of all, I felt that someone intervened and saved my life because, number one, it was a very aggressive breast cancer. Had I gone through with the procedure, you'd probably have swelling around the breasts, and I would have just put it down to, I had surgery this year, and you wouldn't get a mammogram for a long time. Well, with this type of cancer, it advanced super quickly, and so I probably would have died. So someone saved my life, and I don't know why I pushed for that mammogram, but I did. That's grace. That's mercy. That's God pushing you, even when you, in your state of, you're not a perfect person. I'm so impatient, and I'm like, I'm getting this out of the way. And even with that, God still is going to push through and make sure you get that done. Because if it were left up to me in my imperfectness, I would have just gone the procedure. But it was pushed, even with this very tough, strong personality, he pushed through. And I think in that was another journey of faith that was like, God is stronger than me. Because I think I'm really, really strong and I could have got this done. But no, God is stronger than me, and he took care of me. And that was a real turning point for me.
Obviously, in retrospect, you can see that it was the Holy Spirit that was at war with you against your nature, your
Yes.
type A personality that was going to drive through anything, that kept on stopping you, frustrating you through the process, really getting on your last nerve. That all I'm trying to do is something for myself. I'm trying to give myself a midlife gift, and nobody's cooperating. You're all against me, and just let me get this thing done. But yet, it saved your life. And so you had a double mastectomy and went through the treatment and are cancer free at this point.
13 years next week.
13 years next week. So God spared you. But again, another surprise. Your son, 10 years old, begins to... 11?
He was 7.
Seven when it occurred.
Yeah.
Began to act not well, and you took him for an examination, discovered another trauma.
Yeah. So I was diagnosed with cancer in April and had my mastectomy the day before Mother's Day in May. And they put me on a chemotherapy schedule for a year. It was a very aggressive cancer, so I needed to be on chemo for a year. And the day before my first chemo treatment, the very day before, I had my oldest son, who was 10. He was in Tucson at a basketball camp. My youngest son, who was 3 at the time, was at preschool. And my middle son, who's just a happy-go-lucky, smiley kid, still is to this day, was just acting weird. He was very moody, and I had put it down to that he was stressed about my cancer. And he was very much a mama's boy, and I think he was stressed. But my other sister, who was helping care for him, pointed out that he kept going to the bathroom a lot and he was so thirsty. And I was like, well, my diagnostic brain went off. And I said, again, I was like, type A personality. I said, I'm going to get him into the doctor before I go to chemo, because it's going to be hard to deal with it after. So it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the night before chemo started. I take him to the pediatrician. He was the last patient seen. And within 5 minutes of getting there, I said, you should probably test his urine. He seems, hypoglycemic. And within 5 minutes, they had him rushed to the hospital. He nearly died of ketosis. He had juvenile diabetes. He was in the hospital for a week, learning how to be insulin dependent while I was getting chemo. And I couldn't come to the hospital because my white counts were so low. So there you go. Another blow, just a horrible blow.
What are you thinking at this point? Where is God? Who is God? Are you asking those kind of questions? Where was your husband in this? Was he stepping up or was he stepping away? Because this is a recipe that I've seen many times before, that it is the beginning of the withdrawal, the distancing, because it's more than the vowels imply for better and for worse, and sickness and in health, and the maturity levels and the caregiving levels, and the one upon the other begins to erode if there's not, on his part, a very strong faith-centric existence to empower him to be able to handle all of this. Is this kind of the beginning of the coming apart and the distancing? Because it is classic that this is the time in which these problems compound, and it's overwhelming, and it draws on their insecurities and sense of inadequacy and all of their stuff. Delta at least makes you check your bags at the door, but marriage you don't. You carry them on, and all of a sudden they start to surface. And so you've got breast cancer, a year of chemotherapy, a son that you're going to accommodate with juvenile diabetes, and dad's role is now much more involved than just getting up and going to work and being defined by his work, and mama handle everything else. That's no longer the case.
Well, you nailed it, and so articulately. I thank you for that. So you're right. You bring this stuff into the marriage already. You're young. I have fears of abandonment. My husband struggled with some depression issues and some self-worth issues. And so, yes, you've got this kind of type A dynamo woman who's used to handling everything, and a very sweet man who wants to help, but fear paralyzes him, right? And he stepped up and went to the hospital with my son and was there for a week and helped him to be insulin dependent. But it wasn't then, it was really when we came home and had to live the day to day, and I had to go back to work at that point, and I was the breadwinner, and I just couldn't take it all anymore. I looked around my house and I had bills stacked up like this, and it wasn't like I couldn't pay them. I was still working. It was just I couldn't even cope. And I was trying to get my son to not pass out from low blood sugar. I mean, my best friend came in from Oregon to stay with us, and I remember I was in bed recovering from a chemo session, so sick, and she carried this little 7-year-old into me who had passed out from low blood sugar. And I'm just looking around going, here's bills this big. Here's a kid that I have to keep alive. You literally have to keep him alive by balancing insulin. And I'm sick in bed throwing up and so afraid to die, because not only was I afraid to die to leave my children, but I already knew what that was like to be without a mother. So you've got this cyclone of stuff going around. And I don't even know how you deal with that. But yeah, that was, we already had some problems at that point, but we definitely I don't even know how people would get through that. And it was definitely the beginning of the end, for sure.
It's certainly the Job-like experience.
Yeah, yeah.
And
That I hate to compare myself to Job because boy, did he have it. But and there's, as you read in the book, everybody's got their stuff, but it felt like it at that moment.
well, of course, I mean, it would only be natural.
Yeah, yeah.
It would only be natural that it's the compounding and then the magnification of everything that you struggled with was now under the microscope. It was all coming together of your desire to be the perfect mom because you were trying to fill the gap of your mom and your insecurity and in all of that, the abandonment, the rejection, now feeling like your womanhood is under assault. A huge struggle in identity and what does that mean and what does the future look like and am I going to die from this? Am I going to recover from this? Am I going to go through reconstruction? What is going to happen to me? Who am I going to be? And will I still be able to do all of this? And I still have a child that's in great need and I can't get out of bed. And it's overwhelming. It's more than most can bear. But God, and by God's grace, were you able to come through it? We're talking with Michelle Moore, sharing a story that is not as uncommon as you would think. For there are many struggling in silence right now, feeling everything she felt, but with boldness, with transparency, and with a sincere desire to have an impact. She's telling her story so that you would know that you're not alone, and that there's hope, and that there's help, and there's life after trauma, and Jesus came to bind up the brokenhearted and set the captives free. And what the enemy means for evil, God will work for his good so that many will be saved. And because of Michelle's personality, she was willing to take out of the ashes of a marriage and a life that was so radically altered, and instead of focusing on herself, she began to focus on the needs of others. And that is the true story of her healing, was when she got behind the dreams of other people and took her eyes off herself, put them on the Lord and the needs of these other extraordinary women. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue in our conversation with Michelle Moore, author of A Mother's Grace, Healing the World, One Woman at a Time. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, host of Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Revealing Prophecy, seen every week on the Igniting Nation Broadcasting Network. Our daily on-demand programming is available on our Apple and Android apps and on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Android TV. We broadcast live Monday through Friday through our apps, on our website, ignitingnation.com, and on Facebook Live. You can listen daily on our audio platforms on Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, and iHeart. Our lineup of best-selling authors bring you the most in-depth biblical insights into the most pressing issues of our time, including prophecy, Israel, spiritual warfare, and a wide variety of contemporary Christian issues impacting the body of Messiah around the globe. If you missed the live show, you can always catch up on the Igniting Nation YouTube channel. Follow us on social media and join us as we endeavor to heal the nations with the Word of God.
With today's smartphone technology, news, information, sports, and entertainment is widely available and almost unbounded. But what about the information that believers in Yeshua are looking for? Well, now there's an app for that. Igniting a Nation now has apps available for Android and iPhone. With our app, you'll gain access to everything you would in our website, from our featured guests to our live streaming shows. Visit Google Play or the Apple Store and download Igniting a Nation's new app today.
Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, inviting you to study right by my side through the Biblical Truth Library. Imagine having access to over 1,000 hours of audio and video teachings available to you through our website on a subscription basis or via our Apple and Android apps on an a la carte basis. Whichever method you choose, we promise to deliver new insights into the living Word of God as seen through the eyes of a Jewish believer. If you hunger and thirst like millions around the world for a deeper walk with God and the revelation of new understanding of the Scriptures, visit ignitingnation.com and click on the Biblical Truth Library or on any device with our free app. Don't let another day go by without receiving your heart's desire for a new depth of understanding into all of God's Word. Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, inviting you to join me and my special featured guests twice per month with Rabbi Zeb Parat and Carl Gallups, and monthly with Dr. Michael Heiser, Dr. Michael Lake, Dr. Timothy Jennings, Dr. Mark Baker, Dr. Jeffrey Johnson, Drs. Michelle and Mark Sherwood, Dr. Kim Moss, Derek Gilbert, Peter Rosenberger, Brandon Gallups, Steve Fair, Stephen Black for in-depth insights into Israel, prophecy, the unseen realm, the brain, spiritual warfare, overcoming shame, mysteries of the Bible, prophetic insights, the sensational and the supernatural, caregiving, addiction recovery, understanding the divided heart, same-sex attraction, and much more. We're proud to feature some of the greatest biblical minds from both Israel and around the United States. Check out our featured guest lineup and 24/7 feed on ignitingnation.com or watch by topic on any device with our free apps. If you can't find what you need, you're just not looking in the right place. Follow us on social media and download our free apps today. Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, inviting you to join me and Israel's #1 rated guide, Edo Canaan, for our annual Israel trip. Our 2022 trip is now open for registration for our 18th trip to Israel. Our trip will take us from Tel Aviv to the Galilee, down to the Dead Sea, and 4 nights in Jerusalem. You will walk where Yeshua walked and watch the Bible turn from black and white to living color. Visit ignitingnation.com/events and download the registration form today. No, it's not too early to take advantage of our payment plan designed to fit any budget. All of our trips sell out, and we want you to experience this life-changing journey. Registration is now open for April 2nd to 13th, 2022, and we promise you, you will never read your Bible the same way again. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Michelle Moore, author of A Mother's Grace, Healing the World One Woman at a Time. Michelle, welcome back.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Michelle, here you are faced with turmoil, tragedy, and ultimate divorce. Your life has radically changed. Your sense of abandonment is actually confirmed. You've been abandoned. All right? Just like Job said, that which I feared the most has come upon me.
That's right.
But something happened. And instead of you lying in the puddle of your life, allowing the circumstances to overcome you and to consume you, you made a change in perspective that was not of this world, because your circumstances were overwhelming. There's nothing in the natural that would cause anybody to do what you did unless it was God ordained. What happened? What changed? And how did this vision come to you to create Mother's Grace?
I'm so glad you asked me that question. I've done a lot of interviews, and it's the first time that I've actually been asked that specific question. After my second child was born, the one that had diabetes, I had not been sleeping at all. He was born early, and it was very colicky, and so I was up with him every night. So a friend gave me a half day at the spa, sent me to go get a massage. And I went to have the massage and fell asleep during the massage, and because I was so exhausted. And I woke up and I had a dream. I had a dream. I'm not a writer. I went to school for business. I had never thought about doing a 501c3 ever. I was just a businesswoman. I had a dream that I should write a book called A Mother's Prayer and help other mothers that are so scared and worried. I was like, well, now, why in the heck would I do that? But it was so real and so out in left field that I paid attention and started talking to people about it. I had the weirdest dream. And I started, it really started to, gel in my mind. Like, this is what mothers need. They need to know that we can pray for our children, instead of worrying and obsessing and saying, oh my gosh, I got to get them the right coach. I got to get them the right SAT tutor. I've got to get them this. Instead of worrying and obsessing and trying to control children, we can pray and pray and pray and pray and then let go, which is something I knew in my head, conceptualized, but I had never actualized the letting go. So I had this dream and I was like, I'm not a writer, but I can start collecting little nuggets about my thoughts. So I got this big red leather notebook. I write about it in the book, and I started carrying it around in my car. And anytime I thought of something or a song or a prayer that I heard that was motivating about praying for our children, I'd slap it in there. And so, I had no idea how to write a book. I've never thought of it. I was a great reader, but I didn't know what to do with that. And so it just was gelling in my mind all this time. And I was a young mother and I was working, so there was no time for that. So about, a couple years later, I started thinking about the fact that I wanted to start helping moms. And it all started, I was doing some work, I was a businesswoman, and there was an opportunity to get involved in some charities at work. And it started right before I was diagnosed with the breast cancer. It was an AIDS foundation in Africa and India, and they had wanted me to come down and help support CD4 equipment there. And since we were a diagnostic company, I wrote a bunch of grants to our company saying, hey, would you consider donating this great equipment to people that are in need? And our company ended up doing it, and they wanted me to come down. And it was a trip that was put off due to the diagnosis of my breast cancer. But even before that, my other son, who was young at the time, my oldest son and I had been watching TV and saw the unfolding of Hurricane Katrina. And it just hit me as a mother. I mean, I just became much more emotional and maybe less selfish as a mother. And so I saw this. Down there and started cleaning up neighborhoods, and we became very good friends with the woman that became the first chapter in my book. So the dream was set and it was gelling in my mind, but it just unfolded in a very divine way. And that's when I talk about faith, I talk about God just lining up the path for you and letting go and following it instead of trying to change it. And so we went down to New Orleans, cleaned up a couple times, became friends down there, did some fundraisers, and then little other things kept coming along. And as I was doing these things, it started gelling in my mind like, well, I should write a book. It's a mother's prayer, but it's about all these other mothers. And then the cancer came, and that tied it up in a pretty bow. And it was like, well, now I don't just want to help these moms from up on top and write a check and volunteer. Now I understand it. I'm empathetic. I'm not sympathetic. I understand. And because, like you said earlier, God spared me, all I could do was wanted to thank him for the rest of my life. He let me be a mother. I mean, here I am. I have two kids. One graduated from college, one's in college. And my kids were 10, 7, and 3 at the time. And I thought I was going to die. So it was a gift from God. And I'm not saying that, because some people do die of cancer, but it's this big picture that all came together, and he's using me to, not only for my personal growth, but to really understand how he works. He sets thoughts in our mind, and then we can take the path and follow and let go and quit trying to control things. And that's what faith is all about. And that's really what happened for me.
So you founded the ministry, Mother's Grace.
Yeah.
You can find it at mothers-grace.org. And there's ways for people to get involved, see the impact, and to be able to continue this work and expand it in their local community, and to connect with you and how to implement these kind of programs. The stories you tell are all compelling, and there are a variety of stories from a number of different experiences. If you could share one of those stories that stands out in your mind that really resonated with you and showed you that everything you had been through, from the loss of your mother to cancer and juvenile diabetes, was all tuition so that you could ultimately graduate, become whole in your brokenness, to become strong in the broken places, so that you could then use that to advance the kingdom, not for you, but for the glory of God.
Well, I'm glad you asked the question that way. All the stories resonate very much with me, but there's one that's my favorite, and it absolutely ties together what you're saying. It's the glory of God. So I talk about, heading down to New Orleans. It's not something I would have ever done. I was not a cleanup kind of gal, but that was God calling me. But as we got Mother's Grace on its feet, and we started Mother's Grace with $2,000 from a garage sale, and just grew grassroots. But as we got it on its feet, about 5 years later, we were starting to really get more of a regional presence and some of a national presence. And I was really loving everything that was happening, but I was letting God has absolutely directed the trajectory of this charity. So one day after church, I got a call from a dear friend, and it's in the book. And she says, I was at Mass today, and the priest was talking about a village in India, and they are losing at this girls' home. There was about 90 girls in a little orphanage home that's run by 3 nuns. And they were losing girls by horrible, ways, through illness. And they didn't even have a car to drive them to the hospital. So they'd take them in a rickshaw, and it would take all day, and the girls would die on the way to the hospital. And so this gal called and said, this priest is here from India, and he was talking about raising money to be able to get them some transportation. And I was very moved, and she said, I hope you can talk to this priest. Well, he was on an American tour, and he was actually in California, so we spoke on the phone. And we ended up meeting for ice cream one day when he came back to Arizona, and we talked about it, and I was so moved by it. I was just so moved that there were 90 girls living in a home, fearing for their lives, not only because they get illness and couldn't make it to the hospital, but they all had to tie themselves to a rope to go to the bathroom outside of the orphanage because they were being abducted and sold. So I got together with the board of Mother's Grace, and we decided to donate money for the Jeep to be able to take them. And that was the start. And you talk about Mother's Grace being regional. Well, these stories in the book are all over the country and all over the world. And these people were brought into me, not because I went looking for them, because God dropped them into my lap. And that's how this happened. And so next thing that happened is the priest puts me in touch with the nun in India, and we start WhatsApping on the phone, and we become great friends. And she says, Michelle, I would love it if you came down here and saw what your Jeep is doing for these girls. And okay, first of all, I've never wanted to go to India in my life. And I love to travel, and I've been to Europe many times, but I don't want to go by myself, and I didn't want to go to India. I had no desire. But we become friends, and we're WhatsApping, and I'm thinking, why wouldn't I go to India? I become friends with this woman, and there's more work to be done. They want to do a medical center there, and maybe we can help. So I go to the board, and we decide I'm going to go to India. It's just the weirdest thing. I would have never in my wildest dreams thought I want to go to, do I want to go to Hawaii? Yes. Do I want to go to Paris? Yes. But India? So all of a sudden I've got a ticket to India and I'm going by myself. And I never met these people. I am at a hotel. The nun comes from a 7-hour trip in the middle of the night on a bus. And she has gone to the market and she's bought flour, Lay's. And she comes to the hotel and she puts Lay's all over me. And then a friend has joined us and we drive back up into the middle of nowhere in India. Our lives were almost taken by the roads, 7 hours away. And we meet these beautiful people touched by God. Three nuns that are running a home for 90 girls. And there is so much joy and love and God there. There's no phones, there's no TVs, there's no Netflix, there's no, Gap clothes, there's nothing. And they are cooking for 90 girls on a hot plate. And I had more joy there than I've ever had in my life, seeing God at work, because it's not about the whole story. And the nun, Sister Mary, was just this joy-filled woman full of God. She had her little notebook and she was writing in the back of the car. She has all these ideas and she got car sick. And she would pull over, get out, throw up, get back in and start writing to God again. And I was just so moved and inspired by her. And she's one of my favorite chapters in the book. It was just a beautiful experience and very, very divinely led. I would have never gone there without God.
Michelle Moore has gone through a complete transformation, renovation, and is a new creation. As God says in his word, Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 5:17, anyone who is Messiah is a new creation, the old is gone, the new has come. And you're called into a ministry of reconciliation, and you have become an ambassador for God. And this is played out in your life from the ashes, beauty. And God promises beauty from ashes. And so the story of a mother's grace is your story of beauty from ashes. And the stories of 10 others, beauty from ashes. A word of hope for those who are challenged that you are not alone, that there are others who are willing to step out there to help you, to lend you a helping hand, to hear your story, and to relate that you may not want your story to be told, but you can identify with the stories here. And Michelle's transparency of her own life, which is a living testimony to what God can do if we get out of the way and let him. Michelle Moore, author of A Mother's Grace, Healing the World One Woman at a Time. The ministry is mothers-grace.org. Michelle, it is a personal honor and a privilege to know you and to have had you as a guest. And I hope that I see you again.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Like I told you before, I think this was probably my favorite interview.
Praise God. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Blessings to you.
Same to you.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.